What's up, my woozards? It's Dev from Mtg. I'm a magic man, and you know what? Core set's looking really good so far. It's like the best looking core set since 4th edition. Seriously, it's looking really powerful. A lot of people aren't that excited for core sets to come out. They're super simplistic, geared towards beginners, not a whole lot of action, but you're really flipping the paradigm with this core set. A lot of cards look really powerful today, no exception. So let's go ahead and look at these spoilers. Well, finishing up some stuff from last night, I want to look at Flood of Tears, a card that I skipped over yesterday. But after doing some reading and some thinking, it turns out there's some really wonky, janky stuff that you can do with this card, and I'm really excited to do it. So, Flood of Tears is 6 mana, 4 and 2 blue for a sorcery. Return all non-land permanents to their owner's hands. If you return 4 or more non-token permanents you control this way, you may put a permanent card from your hand onto the battlefield. Now, a couple of things about this. When I first read it yesterday, I was thinking, oh, this might be a good replacement for River's Rebuke when Rebuke rotates in a few months here. And that point still stands, but this is actually really interesting in terms of what combos you can pull off. Namely, Omniscience. Now, this is probably the card everyone thought of when they're running through expensive blue cards to cast for free out of their hand. Yeah, Omniscience comes to mind in Standard, obviously. But it turns out it's a lot deeper than that, because all you have to do is cast Flood, play your Omniscience for free, and then, my friend, you play a Tamiyo for free out of your hand. If it was on the battlefield before you cast Flood, that's fine. You just play it for free out of your hand. You got Omniscience on the battlefield. Then, you can get Flood back from your graveyard to your hand and recast it for free. That's going to return the Omniscience to your hand, and the Tamiyo, for that matter, is just an infinite loop. You just keep doing this over and over and over, and all you need to do is add one thing with an enter the battlefield trigger that will eventually win you the game, like a Vayashina Pyromancer, Hierophant's Chalice. It really doesn't matter, anything like that, and you'll eventually win. Jace as well, the 4-mana Jace, will eventually lead to a mill win for you, so that's all of this is really sweet, and I want to try and make something work with this. So Flood of Tears, a little cooler than I originally anticipated, but honestly just its function as a blue board wipe of sorts, a replacement for River's Rebuke, is probably good enough to make it see some sideboard play if nothing else, but I really want to try these combos out. Now, after yesterday's video, they spoiled Repeated Reverberation. This is 4 mana, 2 and 2 red for an instant. When you next cast an instant spell, cast a sorcery spell, or activate a loyalty ability this turn. That's how you word a card. Copy that spell or ability twice. You may choose new targets for the copies. Now, I feel like the marks are falling for this. I know that's language to use, right? But this is 4 mana, and you have to have more mana if you want to do anything other than copy a Planeswalker ability twice. Now, copying a Planeswalker ability twice looks looks like mustard, it looks okay, but at the same time, I'm not sure how incredible it's going to be, especially considering a lot of the abilities that you might want to copy in, say, a heavy red deck, like a Chandra ability, are things like, for instance, the 4-mana Chandra, Fire Artisan. If you copy her plus ability twice, then you still have to have the mana to play all the cards that you're ripping off the top of your library and exiling, so there's that. And that's true of a lot of other Planeswalkers, too. Like, yeah, there are plenty of Planeswalkers, say Nikki B, that you might want to get a triple activation of. But at the same time, I think 4 mana, and more importantly, this is important, a slot in your deck is a little bit too much to ask for a card like this. But let's look at Season of Growth next. This is 2 mana, 1 and a green for an enchantment. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, you scry 1. And whenever you cast a spell that targets a creature you control, you draw a card. Now, this looks like a very good card in the Commander format, if nothing else, and I know you can say that about a lot of cards, but this especially looks very powerful. I've gotten accused before of having a little too low of a bar for Commander, and that really depends on your play group, doesn't it? But at the same time, I think that this one is, you can fairly say, this is definitely a super Commander playable card. Just so much value over the course of a game. Green decks are going to want to scry anyway to help fix their draws. And obviously, whenever you cast a pump spell or an Aura or something like that on one of your dudes, draw a card. That's so good in Enchantress decks and stuff like that. And of course, this is conveniently an enchantment for those decks. So this actually slots into a lot of EDH stuff. But I have reservations about it in Standard, to say the least. Maybe a sideboard card, if nothing else, though. Then again, I guess Naya Feather might want a card like this, because they're going to be recasting the same cards over and over, all of which target their creatures. And drawing extra cards every time you do that is just, yeah, that probably puts the game out of reach, but I'm just not sure Naya Feather has the spots in their deck for this A 2-drop that doesn't really do anything the turn that you play it. I'm just not sure how into an effect like this they'd be. And if they do main deck it, it's probably just a 1 or 2 up. But even then, you're kind of throwing a lot off. You know, you're cutting a pump spell or you're cutting a creature, and that deck really can't afford to do those things. So I'm just not sure this actually goes in. But if there's one deck in Standard that's ideal for this card, it's that. Now, I'll save yesterday's Planeswalker till closer to the end of the video, but don't worry, we'll get to it. I'm going to go ahead and start talking about some of the stuff from today, like Moldervine Reclamation. An interesting card. 5 mana, 3, a green, and a black for an enchantment. Whenever a creature you control dies, you gain a life, and you draw a card. So that's at least a really cool effect. It's Vraska Golgari Queen's +1 on an enchantment, and they actually go kind of well uncurved together for what that's worth. But I like that this is kind of a stalemate breaker. You know, drop this on turn 5, get in with your guys. Even if they die, you're protected from the crackback a little bit, from the life gain, and you draw a bunch of cards to refill your hand. So seems really good. Just a really nice like threat when you send your creatures in for during combat, and a way to punish your opponents for removing your creatures too with spells. So a lot I do like about this, but I don't like the casting cost. 5 mana is a ridiculously expensive rate for this effect, and I know it's a good effect and all, but it's still sort of a do-nothing enchantment. Like, at least it has the chance of doing something the turn it comes out, but 5 mana is very, very steep for this kind of effect that looks like it's good in an Aristocrats deck, but it doesn't actually win you the game. And for 5 mana in an Aristocrats deck, if you're even playing 5-drops to begin with, was a little dubious, to be honest. Then there's probably better options, like Bantu, for instance, is probably a better card than this at the 5-drop slot in any black-carrying Aristocrats decks. Now, most of the other stuff I want to cover today, I don't really have like negative words for. For the most part, there's like Portal of Sanctuary. This is another uncommon that I think is just like, okay, it's 3 mana, 2 and a blue for an artifact, another colored artifact. I like these. You can pay 1 and tap it to return target creature you control and each aura attached to it to their owner's hand. Activate this ability only during your turn. Okay, so when I first read this, I was like, you know, ho-hum, that looks dumb. But actually, I mean, the more you think about it, the more you think of things. Like, this is just a kind of better erratic portal for all the stuff that you usually use erratic portal for. It works in aura decks too. Like, it's actually really good if you're just trying to like repeat enter the battlefield triggers. That seems really, really sweet. I mean, 3 mana, and this is a do-nothing enchantment the turn it enters the battlefield. So it's, again, a little dubious, a little tough to safely play without getting like run over. You know, so you're just tapping out and leaving yourself defenseless on turn 3 if you want to play this on curve. And I do have a problem with those kind of enchantments, but this is something else that could be EDH playable with a bunch of creatures that have ETB triggers. But even in Standard, this could be an interesting one-of in a deck that's just trying to play a bunch of value creatures. Because, yeah, over the course of a few turns, getting to cast that same Basilica Bell Haunt or similar value creature seems like a really, really big game. You know, Elite Guard Mage over and over, yes, I'll take that. So I actually think this is a really interesting card. It might be better than I'm currently evaluating it. Another cool uncommon, probably the best uncommon of the day, actually. This is Fry, right here. Philip J. Fry, 2 mana, 1 and a red for an instant. This spell can't be countered. Fry deals 5 damage to target creature or planeswalker that's white or blue. So read this as this deals 5 damage to target Teferi in Standard, at the very least. Or target Lyra Dawnbringer. There's a bunch of other stuff. Narset, Kefnet, I guess, you know, it'll come back, but whatever. Kill it for the time being. And it's completely uncounterable, too. Like, this is a halt, H-A-W-T sideboard card for red decks that want to be able to compete with 3 fairy and 5 fairy. It's just a ridiculous card against Esper, and yeah, glad to have it. Really can't say much more about the card other than, oh my god, the incredible art on it. Aside from that, this is actually, like, you could make the argument this is one of the most impactful cards we've seen all week. It is, Ziggy. But up next, here's a cool one. This is Marauding Raptor. 2 mana, 1 and a red for a 2/3 dinosaur. Creature spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, Marauding Raptor deals 2 damage to it. If a dinosaur is dealt damage this way, Raptor gets +2/+0 until end of turn. How do you even count all the cool stuff about this card? A 2 mana 2/3 is at least a decent rate in and of itself, has the potential to grow bigger in a dinosaurs deck, and I like that, and it doesn't even have to be in a dinosaurs deck. Note that it plays really, really well in multiples. So if you play another one, it won't kill it. That's nice. It's really, really nice. But this doesn't just work well alongside dinosaurs. This works well alongside creatures with 3 toughness, period, and allows you to cast them for even cheaper. That's very sweet. Like, this might be easily the best 2-drop dinosaur that the Dinosaurs deck has access to. But it's also not a bad 2-drop for like a mono red deck, depending on what else is in your deck. Plus, this also works really well with like Boros Reckoner and Commander and stuff. But True Fire Captain in Standard, there's just a lot of really, really cool things about this card. Above rate, creature spells you cast cost less to cast. Yes, please. So it's a ramp piece in the Dinosaur deck that's also like really good at holding down the fort in the early game, gets bigger as the game goes on, plays well in multiples. The card is just ridiculous. I like a lot about this card, and I wish I had more to say about it, but for the most part, I've just seen people kind of being like, yeah, this card's alright. But no, I think this card is way better than alright, and good lord, if you ever actually get a Polyraptor in play, that's the game. That's the game, boys. Good, pack it in. Cut the lights. Now we're getting into the stuff that I'm like really excited for. Here's Knight of the Ebon Legion right here. Just really takes you back to the Ebon Hand days. This is 1 black mana for a 1/2 Vampire Knight. Check out those creature types. You can pay 2 and a black and have Knight of Ebon Legion get +3/+3 and gain Death Touch until end of turn. And in the beginning of your end step, if any player has lost 4 or more life this turn, you put a +1/+1 counter on Knight of the Ebon Legion. Let me be the first to say this card is absolutely terrifying. This card is insane. This is another one where the take has mostly been, no, it's alright, no, it's ridiculous. This card is crazy. Everybody, like, what happened? I had no idea that a 1-mana creature that can turn into a 4/5 Death Touch was a bad card. This looks ridiculous. Oh, and by the way, it can get even bigger than that. Oh, and by the way, it synergizes with itself if it gets through for combat damage. Pay the extra mana, suddenly it deals 4 damage, and it grows, it gets bigger. It's a 1-drop. It gets like huge over the course of some games, and it works really well with the Danto Vanguard. You know, activate a Danto Vanguard one time, this gets a +1/+1 counter. That seems incredibly sweet. Any 1-drop, or 2-drop for that matter even, early game creature that can go way above its stats in the mid to late game is always incredibly desirable, and this can trade way up in the mid to late game too, with like 5 and 6 drops if that's what you want to trade with a Carnage Tyrant. If you have 3 mana, that seems pretty decent. if nothing else, like just a crazy card. And if you actually like, you know, get to swinging in on your opponent and just hitting them for 4 a turn or 2, this just gets even bigger, you know. They just took 4+ damage in a combat step, and this got even bigger, making their day that much worse on your next turn. So this card just gets incrementally better as the game goes on. I don't see why this card is just kind of like meh to people. Even Ziggy, all right, Bubba? That was very, very cute, buddy. But I guess he's like, calm down, Pops. But no, I refuse to. I am very excited about this card, and I will not calm down. But let's check out the next in the Cavalier cycle here. We get a whole cycle of these 5-mana things. This is 2 and 3 white for a 4/6 Vigilance. When it enters the battlefield, destroy up to 1 target non-land permanent. Jeez. Its controller creates a colorless 3/3 Golem artifact creature token. When Cavalier of Dawn dies, return target artifact or enchantment from your graveyard to your hand. Now I want to have problems with this card. For the next 3 months, we have Lyra Dawnbringer, which is just the better white 5-drop, just is. For most purposes. Now, Lyra doesn't do anything when she enters the battlefield, which has always been one of the worst things about Lyra, is you don't get really any value out of her if she just gets killed. This, you get to kill whatever you want. You just get to destroy it. So it's so insane, you know? Like, Answer to Fairy with this seems like a pretty sweet thing to be able to do, and really this gives mono white an answer to a lot of different cards. Just any non-land permanent, that is a very, very good enter the battlefield trigger. A super sweet line of text, and note that you can actually just like target your own guys, you know, target small creatures and get a bigger creature out of it. You know, your 1/1 or something. Like, you can hit your own Hunted Witness and get a 3/3 and a 1/1 lifelink. And that seems pretty sweet, too. This card looks pretty stacked. And as much as I want to, like, downplay it and be like, white 5-drops, you play Oketra, you play Lyra, whatever, it's not that big of a deal. Nah. The end of the battlefield trigger is just, you cannot ignore how good that line of text is. Buddy, my breath is bad today and I know it. Why do you want to be all up in my face? Anyway. You can't ignore that. And you also can't ignore the dice trigger. Get back History of Benalia or Legion's Landing or like a million other cards, but those are the two that come to mind. Just this with History of Benalia seems like insane value too, so can't really count the card out at all. Well, we got the green ley line today, but it's not the one that we thought we might get. We didn't get regular green ley line. We got Ley Line of Abundance. This is 4 mana, 2 and 2 green for an enchantment. If Ley Line of Abundance is in your opening hand, you may begin the game with it on the battlefield. That's what ley lines do. Whenever you tap a creature for mana, add an additional green. And you can pay 6 and 2 green to put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Well, this is either busted, bannably busted, or not good at all. And I'm kind of leaning towards not good at all, but there's still those like Magic Christmas Land Timmy thoughts that try to swim up into your brain, you know. Well, you start the game with this on the battlefield, and you play Long Worlds. Next turn, you play like an Incubation Druid, and you play Nissa, and now all your forests tap for 3 mana, and like that seems great, but I really doubt that's what you want to be doing. Although I will say that even if you play this on like turn 4, you don't get it in your opening hand. Just play this on turn 4. It might not be a bad card. You know, usually you want to affect the battlefield in more ways than just this on turn 4. But at the same time, it's kind of like Nissa in that way. You know, you play Nissa as quickly as you can in the game, turn 3 ideally. You untap a forest. And yeah, you did get a creature that turn. You got to untap mana, all that. But the real value from Nissa comes the next turn when you untap all of your lands. And that's kind of how this is. The real value out of this card, if you have to actually pay mana for it, comes on the next turn when you untap all your mana dorks. And suddenly you can just make 30 mana or something. It's not that much, but still. Like I imagine if you have a Lawn of Werewolves, a Paradise Druid, and a Nissa on the table, this is just getting you every last ounce of mana. But is that a bit win more if you already have a Nissa out? These are the kind of things that keep me up at night. So I'm not sure the card is actually playable, even despite the ridiculous activated ability once you get enough mana too. And I do like this, before I close on this card, I've been playing a lot of Nissa on Arena lately, like different Nissa decks, been trying to mess around with Simic Nissa, Teamer Nissa, Sultai Nissa. I've just been playing a lot of Nissa. And one thing that happens an awful lot in Nissa decks is that you just draw dead for a turn, you know? Like a forest is a decent draw if you have a Nissa out, but it's not. You want to draw stuff to spend all of this mana on. I want to draw into my Hydroid Krasis. I want to draw into my Finale or whatever I'm playing, or my Mass Manipulation. And some turns, if you don't draw those cards, you really can't do anything, and it feels bad, other than just make a land a creature. But with this on the battlefield, you always have something to do with extra mana, and it's really good. Put a +1/+1 counter on not only all your mana dorks, but all the lands that you've made into creatures at that point. It's just, yeah, it's a decent mana sink, even though it looks incredibly expensive. The Nissa deck wants this exact mana sink, so I like a lot about the card, but it, again, a little suspect, to say the least. I want to try it out before I really can say whether or not it's even decent or terrible, because it's going to go one way or the other. But let's check out the talk of the town. There's a lot of cards people are talking about today, but as far as Twitter takes go, I don't think I've seen anybody talk about any card from today more than Rotting Regisaur. This is 3 mana, 2 and a black, just 3 mana for a 7/6 zombie dinosaur. And at the beginning of your upkeep, you discard a card. All right, I'm going to shock you. This is just okay. This is all right. I mean, the question that this kind of design begs is, how big would this creature have to be? How big does a 3 mana creature have to be before you go, wow? Like, it's completely subjective. And I think a lot of people are going, wow! Such wow, so amazed about this card today. And yeah, the stats are bonkers. For 3 mana, the stats are ridiculous. 7/6 for 3 is just a lot. But, and you can play this on turn 2. With the Lawn of Werewolves, and yeah, that seems like maybe one of the better ways to start a game in all of Standard. So don't get me wrong, I think the card is probably Standard playable and will at least see some testing, but that's where everything starts to shift. And I'm not going to use the dies to removal argument entirely. I have more arguments than just that, but it does die to cast down, and a bunch of other stuff. I know Tyrant Scorn, for instance, is another good call on that. But no, it doesn't die to like any red removal. So that's, yeah, I'll give you that. That's very important. So dice to removal is not my only argument, and it would be a bad argument if it were. Really, one of my problems here is the lack of any sort of keyword abilities. It's effectively worse than a vanilla creature because it actually has a downside, although I've got plenty to say about the quote-unquote downside as well. But still, it's technically worse than a vanilla creature. Doesn't have any trample, doesn't have any death touch, doesn't have any menace, doesn't have flying, just no keyword, no evasion whatsoever. And that bothers me just a little bit. Just a little bit. And this won't, like, 2-for-1 in combat the way you want it to. You know, send it through, it gets double blocked, and yeah, it might die, but so do 2 of your opponent's creatures, so you're technically 2-for-1. Not really. As soon as you run this into combat, by the time you can run this into combat, you've already discarded at least 1 card to it. So it's not really 2-for-1ing. And if it stays on the battlefield longer than that, it can effectively 3 or 4-for-1 you. And I don't think you want that either. Although, really important part of the design of this card, it's supposed to say, cards like this are usually designed in such a way that they say, like, during a certain point during your turn, discard a card or sacrifice Riding Regisaur. This doesn't say that. This just says discard a card. So if you don't have any cards in your hand, it's fine. It's gravy. You're keeping it on the battlefield, kid. Whatever. So that seems like an interesting wrinkle in what would normally be a pretty awful stipulation on the card. In that once you go Hellbent, you're just done. You have to sack it. Not true here. So I like that. And obviously, like I've said a million times in every spoiler season, discarding cards can obviously be an advantage. Discard a card with Jumpstart, for instance. Chemister's Insight, a Radical Idea, you really didn't lose much in that exchange. Discard a Gutter Bones, you also didn't lose much there. There's a ton of other things, I guess. Resembling Skeleton if you want to go that low on the totem pole, but Arc-like Phoenix decks and Grixis might try this card out, although I highly doubt it. They don't have the slots for another creature. But there's just plenty of ways that you can turn discarding into an upside, so I can't really fuss about that too much. But in most of the fair, like, aggro or mid-range decks that just want a giant threat on turn 3 to start taking over the game, I don't know that you're going to be wanting to discard a card every turn. Let me just put it that way. So I want to have a lot more faith in this card because, yeah, 3 mana 7/6. Dog, that's ridiculous, my dude. But I'm not sure. I want to see how this pans out before I go on record as saying, like, this is a dumb card to print. Because that's mostly the take I've heard is, like, this is a dumb print. Why print this ridiculous thing, Wizards? Are you out of your minds? I don't think they are. I think they know exactly what they're doing, and this probably won't do as much as it initially looks like it will. But I've eaten my words before, and I'm ready to do it again. But up next, let's look at Sorin, Imperious bloodlord. He's always a bloodlord. This is 3 mana, 2 and a black for a 4 loyalty planeswalker. You can +1 it, and target creature you control gains death touch and lifelink until end of turn. If it's a vampire, put a +1/+1 counter on it. You can also +1 Sorin to sacrifice a vampire, and when you do, Imperious Bloodlord Lightning Helix is a thing, 3 damage to a target, and you gain 3 life. Or you can -3 Sorin to put a vampire creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. Okay, so Arcane Adaptation, let's just get that out of the way. Yes, if you have an Arcane Adaptation, you just play a Zatalpa, I don't know, play stuff. play huge stuff from your hand if you want to. That's a little bit janky, but I actually think that for the next few months, while vampires are still a real tribe in Standard, they just get, like, decimated once Ixalan block rotates. But while they're still around, this is a great 3-drop Planeswalker, and it sort of solves the problem of 3-drop vampires in Standard a little bit. Like, that deck has Mavern Fane, and not a whole lot else that you really, really want to play in the 3-drop slot. That's kind of where a lot of the value drops off. Vampires has really good, like, 1 and especially 2 drops. But again, 3, I don't know. They have Sanctum Seeker at 4, so things start picking up again. But there's plenty of stuff you can do with this, even without, like, Arcane Adaptation in the Vampires deck. You can drop a Champion of Dusk, and that seems pretty good right then and there. Turn 3 Champion, yeah, that's nice. Especially if you're able to actually go, like, 1-drop Vampire, 2-drop Vampire, Champion of Dusk, turn 3, very good. Or even, like, Haunt of Hightower. doesn't turn 3 Haunt of Hightower does not seem bad whatsoever. Like, one of the whole restrictions on Haunt of Hightower as a buy a box promo is the casting cost. They made it cost like way too much to actually see Standard play, but if you're paying 3 mana for Haunt, it's pretty good. So 3 mana and a card, basically a Sorin. But you get to keep Sorin out if he uses -3 the first turn he's in play. So that's sweet. If he survives that turn, the next turn he can give whatever you played Death Touch and Lifelink. It's really good. And a +1/+1 counter. It's fantastic. I like so much about this Sorin in terms of sort of making vampires real. And I don't even think you have to play Haunt of Hightower or anything in that deck. I don't think you have to go to those extremes. You'd probably just play a fair, low-to-the-ground vampire aggro deck. And this is almost a finishing piece for you. It allows you to spend your mana however you want to. You know, spend 3 mana to play a vampire, and then drop a vampire for free. So just explode onto the board. There's a lot you can do with this. You can take advantage of Dye's triggers. This is effectively a free sack outlet once a turn, so I like that too. It also lightning helixes your opponent. A little bit of reach for the vampire deck. It doesn't usually get that kind of stuff, so yeah. Sorin is actually a very good walker in the one deck. Outside of vampires, all this does is give creatures death touch and lifelink, which is actually pretty good. When you think about it, for 3 mana plus 1 every turn to give a creature death touch or lifelink, not half bad. But still, this is mostly only going to see play in vampires. But it is a very, very critical card for that deck, and it might actually make them see some real play again. But up next, let's look at Yarok. The desecrated here. This is 5 mana. That's a lot. 2, a black, a blue, and a green Sultai colors. For a 3/5 legendary elemental horror with death touch and lifelink. We're just talking about how good those abilities were. And if a permanent entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. So is this card the real deal, or is it a panharmonic con job? I actually think this card is very serious in Sultai decks. 100%, if nothing else, because of the stats. You know, I just brought up Cletus a few videos ago, and I can't even remember what context. Leyline Prowler. That's the context I brought up Cletus in. This, too, reminds me of Cletus, but, like, even more. This costs 1 more than Cletus, but it's still a 3/5 lifelink death touch. That just shuts down aggro decks entirely, especially like mono red aggro decks. Please come at me with your lava coils and stuff. Nothing in these decks can kill this outside of like Fight for Fire in game 2 or Fight with Fire in game 2 and 3. So this card is great against aggro specifically, but it does more than that. Obviously the Sultai deck is full of value creatures. Obviously this doesn't work with Hydroid Krasis. That's a cast trigger, so that's a little bit different, but pretty much every other, Golgari Fine Broker, Ravenous Chupacabra, and a million other cards in these decks. Explore package creatures, for instance, this works insanely well with. Just think about this in Sultai Explore at the top of the curve. Just an Explore package makes this card absolutely ludicrous. So, I got high hopes for this. 5 mana is a lot, and you have to be very, very good at 5 mana to really see play in Standard, but I think this hits the mark, and this would go really well in like Moldervine decks too, for what that's worth. But again, I don't think you have to go to that extreme and play a 6 mana card like Moldervine. If you're playing a 6 mana card in this deck, it's probably Liliana or something like that. But just Sultai's got a real serious finishing card at this point that just like makes all of its creatures even better than they already were, and they were already all pretty good. So, huge fan of this card. Probably a ridiculous commander too, but this is one of those few commanders that we've seen in this set that, yeah, it's going to be crazy in EDH, but it's definitely Standard playable, to my mind at least. Well, let's talk about these temples for just a second while we move through this video. Yeah, temples are back. These are the off color, the enemy color temples. Not sure if we'll get other temples in this set or not, but even if this is all we get, these are really good, and don't underestimate them. Not everyone that's watching this video has been playing since there as block. I've got a lot of new viewers, actually, and you might be like, these are just guild gates that scry. Yeah, I mean, technically they are that, but they're very good. I mean, think about this too. London Mulligan rule now, and scry duels. Play whatever kind of deck you want, kid. It really doesn't matter. You're going to get the cards that you want in the first couple of turns. Scry lands are always going to be better than they look. And a lot of people misjudged these when we first saw them in Theros, and then suddenly, they're the best lands in the format at the time. We've got both check lands for the next few months, as well as shock lands in this format. So I'm not sure how much play these actually do see, but they'll almost certainly be a 1 or 2 of in some decks, and you'll even see some decks nowadays that play guild gates. Because they just want all of the colored sources, all of the duels. Well, these are definitely going to take the place of guild gates in these decks that do play 1 or 2 guild gates. But last card of the day so far, at least. This is Yanling, Sky Dancer. 3 mana, 1 and 2 blue for a legendary planeswalker, Yanling. This starts with 2 loyalty. You can +2 her, and until your next turn, up to 1 target creature gets -2, -0, and loses flying. -3 Yanling to create a 4/4 blue elemental bird creature token with flying. And you can -8 Yanling, and you get an emblem with islands you control have tap, draw a card. Now, back in my day, Sky Dancers were a kid's toy that flew into the air on these little wings that it had, and it would put your freaking eye out, and they had to cancel them to get rid of those toys. And stop selling them. And this kind of reminds me of that, not only because the name is Sky Dancer, but because it will put your freaking eye out if you're not careful. This card is actually kind of serious. And I didn't like it at first either, but like the more I look at it, the more I think, yeah, it's probably fine. It's a 3-mana Planeswalker, which is just good on its own. And there's probably better 3-mana Planeswalkers in a Narset, and especially 3 Fairy. Probably better for the decks that play blue anyway than a card like this. But aside from that, I really don't have any negative things to say about it other than like, oh, there's probably better cards. Everything the card does is pretty good. I guess the only other negative criticism you could level at is the obvious one, which is it can't use its negative ability the turn it hits the battlefield. It would be really nice if it could, but it's one of those rare, very rare walkers that can't. However, the plus ability is +2, and that's very nice. Meaning that if you +2 it, it survives for a turn, and then you create a bird, it'll stay around, so you get a bird and a planeswalker. That's nice. But coolest thing about this is the protection ability is actually really, really nice. Again, it's a +2, and in the early game, you get this on curve, for instance. A -2/-0 is going to keep a creature from dealing damage, basically a Maze of Ith, against flyers even, too. So that's really, really nice. I think the protection ability is actually good on this, all the way up to the mid-game, for what that's worth. It'll keep creatures, even big-ish creatures, from attacking into your board state, if you even have 1 or 2 other creatures out. So I really like the pro ability on this. As far as the minus ability, the first minus ability, that's very good. Even just getting this one turn a game is great. You play this on turn 3, you neuter a creature on the other side of the table, and then on your turn 4, you not only get a 4/4 Angel, you have all of your mana untapped. You get a 4/4 Angel for effectively no mana on that turn, and that is insane. I said Angel Bird. I keep wanting to say Angel because it's a 4/4 flyer. But, yeah, you get a 4/4 Elemental Bird for free on your turn 4, and that seems fantastic. Or, I guess, technically, you could go, like, turn 1, Breeding Pool, untap, Lawnmower Elves. Turn 2, play this after an island. So, yeah, that's maybe that. But I highly doubt that's going to be a thing. But maybe Blue-Green Yanling, even rhymes almost, could be real. But I doubt it. I will say, though, just a free 4/4 on turn 4 is, yeah, we'll do that. And if you ever actually do get to the ultimate, which is like, possible. If you do get to the ultimate, you don't win the game right then and there, but you win the game. Just anytime it's the end of your opponent's turn and you have an extra 3 or 4 islands untapped, just draw 3 or 4 cards. It's so good. So I actually think this card is way better than I initially evaluated it, and I'm kind of glad that I didn't talk about it last night. Because since then, I've had a lot of time to really think about it, absorb what the card does on curve and all that. And I really think this card might have a real shot in Standard. But that's all she wrote for the M20 spoilers today. Make sure that you do all the things before you get out of here, before you cut the lights. Make sure you comment. Let me know how you felt about not only these cards, but I guess my takes on them too. I could be royally wrong on any of these, and I could have gotten something factually wrong as far as interactions. So hold my feet to the fire in the comments section and let me know where I am just dead freaking wrong as far as my opinions and stuff go. And just let me know about any cards that you don't think I praised enough and all that. So do that. Also like the video. That really helps around here. Share it around for more spoiler love for everybody. Everybody wants that. Put it in more recommended feeds. And, of course, subscribe. We haven't done it yet. Lots of spoilers coming up, plus my exclusive spoiler in just a few days. So get with it. Subscribe, hit the bell for notifications. Hit up the Patreon if you really want to help around here. Lots of reasons to do that. Check the link in the description. Or if you want to pre-order any of this nonsense, either singles or boosters and stuff, just hit the first link in the description. Go over to TCG Player. They sponsor your boy. They're good to me, but I can actually, honestly, truthfully tell you that's where you're going to get these cards for the lowest price. So go to COG Player. Hit the link in the description. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I am donezo for this onezo. So I'll catch you cats tomorrow. I'm Deb from the place. Thanks for watching, my wizards. Spread love and be kind.